All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Matt Winchester, and I am here talking about NPM. If you came here looking for something else, you're in the wrong room. We're talking about why we love the letters NPM. Just a bit of candidness with you guys. I've gone back and forth about how to handle this presentation. I have a live demo version and a slide version that I've been going back and forth on which to do. I think I've settled on the slide version, and the advantage of this means that as we go through the slides, if there's something that you feel like you would like a little extra explanation on or a little bit of a demo, we can switch over to some of what I prepared with the live demo. We can do a little live demo to demonstrate what we just talked about. And so the gist here is that we can kind of proceed at your pace. If you want me to slow down, someone will say, hey, what was that? What was that all about? And I will be happy to slow down and explain things for you guys. And I have more slides than I have time. So we will undoubtedly not get to everything, and I'm just gonna, when we get to 5 minutes, we'll cut off and we'll go from there. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into this thing. Okay, first talk a little about myself because that seems like the right thing to do. So like I said, my name is Matt Winchester. I'm on Twitter and GitHub. You can follow me at those handles there. You'll see at the bottom, there's a hashtag there, what is NPM? This is a hashtag that if you guys are sitting there and I'm talking about NPM install and you know NPM install in and out and you're a little bored, go ahead and think up a little acronym. Tweet it out to that hashtag. At the end of the talk, I'm going to bring up and see what you guys came up with. So it should be fun. Anyway, so yeah, I've been working with the web over 10 years now. I got a computer science degree from BYU. Currently, I work for a company called Workfront, formerly called @Task. I'm currently on the front-end architecture team for Workfront there. Really enjoying the stuff that we're doing. We're heavily leveraging NPM there. And just like everybody else, yes, we're hiring and regular spiel. Also, I'm one of the organizers for AngularJS Utah. One of the most common responses I get, thank you. One of the most common responses I get when I say, oh, my name is Matt Winchester, like, oh, you're the one who sends me all those emails all the time. And yes, that's me. We have 2 chapters of the AngularJS Utah. I'm an organizer for the Utah County chapter. We meet at Adobe on the second Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. If you want to come, check us out on meetup.com. Show up. We'd love to have you. Okay, enough of shameless plugs. Let's move on. Okay, so what is NPM? So NPM is a package manager, right? So it has a bunch of packages, and you can use them to bring them into your project, right? I hope this isn't groundbreaking for anybody here. It has, when I last checked, over 185,000 packages, making it one of the most popular package managers out there. I'm not sure if it is the most, but I would think so. I got nods, so I'm going to go with that. I didn't go up and pull up everybody else and see what their numbers were at. They crossed the threshold of over 2 billion downloads a month, which is, if you do the math, over 760 downloads per second. So that's pretty impressive, I think, for a package manager and the things that they've been able to do. So, to sum it up, they're kind of a big deal. They do a lot of things. I think a lot of the reason for NPM's success comes from their promotion of the idea of doing small modules, small cohesive modules that do one thing and do it well, and then to make it easy to consume those modules and reuse them in your code. Some credit goes to Node as well in that, I think. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in. So when you're talking about a package manager, the first thing is the package, right? You have to talk about the package. It's the fundamental unit of a package manager. And what defines a package in NPM is the package.json file. The package.json file has so many options you can use. It's incredible. You can even put in your own custom metadata. That's actually something that we've leveraged a little bit at Workfront in developing our modularity paradigm. The most important pieces here are the name and the version. Those are the ones that you absolutely have to have. You need to be able to say what it is, because otherwise how are people going to find it and install it? And you need to be able to say what version it's at. And the version is very important. The version is a specific type of version called a semantic version or semantic versioning, which we'll talk about in just a second here. And then the other very important piece, although it's not required, is your dependencies. And there's lots of different flavors of dependencies, and we'll get into some of the differences between those as well. But that's so that way NPM knows what it is you depend on, and it can do all sorts of nice things for you once you tell it that stuff. So there you go, package.json. We'll reference things in the package.json quite a bit throughout this. Okay, moving on, semantic versioning. While the point of this isn't to talk about semantic versioning, it is very central to what NPM does. Semantic versioning is a version that's made up of 3 parts primarily. There's more to this, and there's a little asterisk, semver.org. The major, the minor, and the patch version. Major version changes when there's breaking changes. Minor version when you're adding functionality that's backwards compatible. Patch version with backwards compatible bug fixes. Okay. The main reason for this is it's a mode of communication. You communicate from package author to package consumer. When you change something, you're telling them the nature of what you changed so they know what kind of attention they should be paying to it. So keep moving on there. Any questions about semver? Everyone good? Good. I was hoping that was review. So, okay, NPM install. So I like to think of NPM install as a waiter who's coming to your table and he's asking what you would like. You tell him what you want and he goes and gets it for you and puts it on your table. Okay, and that table, extending the theory, is your node modules directory, which is the other central piece of a NPM package. You have your package.json in the node modules directory. The node modules directory is where all your dependencies live once NPM has installed them. In this case, he's asking for the most recent version of Lodash. The @ version part is optional. You can just say, give it to me. Okay, so if NPM install is a waiter, I'm going to really stretch this metaphor a bit here. But if NPM install is a waiter, then running NPM install with no arguments on it is like saying, I'll have my usual, right? So you go up, the waiter knows you, you've been here a million times, and I'll just have my usual. How does he know what your usual is? Well, that's back what we saw at the package.json, right? That's all those dependencies that are listed. Okay. Everyone good? Great. Moving on. NPM update. It's another flavor of NPM install if you want to think of that. The one main difference between NPM install and NPM update, NPM install guarantees that all your dependencies are met and that's it. So that can be a good thing. What that means is if you have all your dependencies met, it's not going to go out to the network. It already can tell just from examining your file structure. NPM update, on the other hand, will make sure that there's no more, that if there's a more recent version available that's within the range you specified, it will install that for you. Okay, so new is always better, or is it? Okay, dev dependencies. So dependencies are things that you depend on to run your program, right? So that's an important distinction. If you're writing like a command line interface or something like that, you might rely on prompt or something like that, and you need that to run at runtime. That's what a regular dependency. A dev dependency, on the other hand, is something that you need only while you're developing it. Excuse me. And the distinction here is important, and the reason why is because as NPM goes in and brings in all your dependencies, let's say I'm bringing in a front-end module and it uses Karma and Phantom to test itself. I don't want to have to download Karma and Phantom just because I depend on it. I only want the stuff that it needs to run. That's the important part. So dev dependencies are kind of like the things that you need. It's like testing, linting, bundling, or as I like to call it, good module hygiene, your personal hygiene for your module. Those things go in dev dependencies, so that way other people don't have to download them. You usually do your hygiene at home, so that's what you do here with your modules as well. Your dev dependencies are these things that hygiene. Got it. I think I drilled that point enough. Okay, peer dependencies. This is one that confuses people a fair amount, but it's actually pretty straightforward and simple. Peer dependencies are 2 things. They're first, that you need it to run, which it shares with regular dependency. But it has an additional point, and that is you expect your consumer to provide it. So the example I like to use, who here is familiar with gulp? Right? Okay, good. I was hoping that. This would be a lot more awkward if you didn't know what gulp was. So let's say you're writing a gulp plugin that you want to put in a stream and does something super awesome. You depend on gulp, but you don't want every single gulp plugin to reinstall gulp every time and potentially have different versions of gulp they need. Instead, you say, hey, I depend on gulp, but I expect if you're using me, you've already got gulp. So that's the main point of a peer dependency is making that distinction. Oftentimes, if you make it a peer dependency, you'll also make it a dev dependency at the same time, because at that point, you don't have a consuming module to provide it.
So is that like saying you expect that thing to be installed globally as opposed to in package?
Not necessarily. You could use it with global things, but it's not always necessarily. There's definitely packages that you could use Usually you're inside of a framework of some sort. A way we've used this at Workfront when bundling our front-end modules is that we depend on Angular. But we don't want every single package to install Angular. Now, that's not a globally available CLI tool, but we don't want them every single one installing Angular either. So we say, hey, it's a peer dependency, it's something we need, and we expect the hosting web page to provide it.
I have a question. Does NPM verify that you have that when you install?
So yeah, what NPM does, they changed behavior with NPM 3, which just recently came out as stable. But NPM 2, it would do a warning and say, hey, you have a peer dependency and you don't have it listed as a dev dependency another way, and it would install it for you nicely. NPM 3 doesn't do that anymore. That's deprecated behavior. So that's an important thing to watch, what version of NPM you're using, what behavior there. But if you list it as a dev dependency, then you don't have to worry about it, right? Any others on that?
How does it handle
Version differences with peer dependencies? So it will complain about it if the installed version it's using doesn't match the version range you specified. But I haven't run into that problem too much, usually because when you're specifying a peer dependency, you like to be somewhat broad, right? So you can account for that. Does that make sense? You good? Okay, peer dependencies. Like I said, sometimes this trips up people, but really it's just these two parts. You need it to run, and you expect your consumer to provide it. All right, there you go. So it's some shortcuts, npm I, npm up. We didn't talk about --save and --save dev and all that. So just some convenient stuff as you're installing things on the command line. You have a module, you want to bring in, say, Lodash. You do npm install Lodash. You don't want to have to type that every time you start working with your module. So you want it saved to your package.json file. You can go in and edit your package.json, and that's totally cool. Or you can use these flags, and these flags will save it to the appropriate thing. --save will save it to the dependencies. --save dev will save it to the dev dependencies. Save exact is one that I've been using recently with some modules that I trust less than others on how they update. And basically, instead of installing, by default, it'll install a version range. It will install just the exact version. So just handy stuff to keep you going. Okay. So back in the package.json, now I want to talk about some of the more, I feel like that was the basics. We got to get some of the basics out of the way, right? Now we're getting into some of the stuff that I think is more fun. So there's a bin object, and what the bin object does is it provides binaries like it would suggest. Although technically they're not binaries because it's JavaScript and it's interpreted. But for every entry in here, you're saying this is something I would want to expose as a command line script, right? So you give it an alias of whatever you want to call it, and then you give it a path to the actual thing. So like, let's say for instance, gulp. Gulp's going to have one of these, right? They're going to have an instance. They're going to call it gulp. The path to it's going to be relative to their package. And the path may be something like libcli.js. It may not actually be called gulp, but it uses symbolic links or symlinks to be able to fake it and make it say gulp when it installs it. NPM makes making CLIs awesome. I really love the tools that NPM provides. Everything is very straightforward. Yeah, we'll keep going. Okay. Run scripts. Run scripts, another powerful tool. I'm setting up a few of these things because then I want to take and start slamming them together, and you'll start to see the cool ways that they can be used when they're brought together. So run scripts are the things you need to do to build your module, right? So in this case, oh look, see, I have a cursor. Look at that. So if you do npm test, it will run karma start in this instance. Maybe you're running Mocha instead. Maybe you're running something else. Really doesn't matter. This is something that's worked really well for us as we have worked with our CI environment. Our CI script just runs npm test. And then underneath the hood, we could change it out. We could use a different library. We could use a different test runner. We could use all sorts of different things, but the abstraction is there that we just run npm test. So that's a handy thing about it. Webpack to build, JS, and you could put ESLint, you could put whatever you want in here, and then these are the commands that you run it. You'll notice that there's no run on test and start, and I think a few others get special status where you don't have to prefix it with run, just because they're trying to encourage you to use them. Cool here? Okay. All right. built inside of that, there's also, you can do hooks based around these things. So you do build, but maybe first you always want to make sure that you've installed. So you put pre-build as npm install. So before it runs it, it'll run npm install. There's also one here. You'll notice pre-publish. I don't have a publish task. That's because this actually hooks into a native npm command, which is publish. So whenever you go to say npm publish and publish your module to the registry, it will run, in this case, hi mom first, which is obviously not very useful. But you kind of get the point of how it works. Pre-publish is also unique that it'll also run when you install. And there's a whole reasonings for that you can go and read about. But yeah, that's the other side of npm lifecycle hooks, is that they give you that. The nice advantage of that is that if you go to run a script and you just ran it yourself and you forgot to do some setup, this can take care of it for you and make sure that your setup is done. Okay, so I'm a Zelda fan, so this was inevitable at some point. But like I said, I want to start taking these things and start putting them together. So talking about run scripts have one thing which is really cool. And to me, when I figured this out, this unlocked a lot of the potential of NPM. That's what this image is unlocking, right? Okay. So what it would do is whenever you run a command in NPM, when you install an NPM, in your node modules directory, it creates a .bin directory. And inside of that, it has symlinks to all those bin objects. Remember we talked about that? So if you install gulp globally, it installs to a global location and puts a symlink to something on your path. Probably user local bin if you're on Mac, or something else if you're on Windows or Linux. I don't know what Linux is, but something equivalent. When you install it locally, it puts it in the .bin directory of your node modules. And so if you list these out, you'll actually see that all of these point to installed modules and their executables. So the really cool thing is that when you do a run script, these get put on your path. Now really quickly, does everyone know what path is when I say it's on your path? No, yes, no, I see a few nodding heads. Okay, all right, so we're good. So it puts it on your path, all of these things. So that means that you can take something traditionally that you've installed globally, like gulp or karma or JSHint, and instead of installing globally, you can have them installed in your package, and that you can run them inside your run script as if it was global, and because it's prefixed on your path, it just works. It's really handy. The really powerful stuff about this is, let's say gulp comes out with some new version, major version that like totally reinvents the way gulp works. And all of a sudden now all your old projects that require an old version of gulp, you can't build them with the new one that you've updated, but you have other projects that need the new one. Well, if you do this, then you can have one version for some of your modules, and you can have a different version for the ones that need it. And so you can still reliably build your stuff. So this is a really powerful concept. Like I said, it unlocked a lot of potential for what I saw NPM doing. I'm trying to remember when I'm supposed to stop here. I think I'm way ahead of time, but anyway, we'll keep going. Someone's just gonna have to tell me when I'm like 5 minutes. Does anyone?
Until 4 o'clock.
Until 4, that's when it is? Thank you, good. So I got lots of time, that's good. All right, I was worried it was like 45 and I was like, where did the time go? Okay, anyway, global. So global installs allow you to install to a global location. I'm going to give the examples for Mac because that's what I use, but it uses this user local lib node modules. It works very much the same to how your node modules directory works in your local package, which is that it just installs it as another directory there, brings in everything that was published. It also will create a symlink for every bin entry from that node that points to the scripts that are referenced in the bin object to the user local bin, which is a directory on your path. So again, cool stuff. Okay, NPM link. If you're going to be working with, sorry, never mind. If you're going to be working with modules and wanting to make sure that they work together before you publish. So we're going to tell a little bit of a story here. Story time. Here's a module, okay? He has a mustache on it because he's called Mustachify, and his job is that he takes everything and puts mustaches on it, right? That sounds like a pretty cool module. And we've been working hard on this module, and we think it's ready to publish, right? So we've done our tests, we've done our documentation, we think we're ready to go. But there's a problem, is that this module was designed to be used inside of an app, okay? That's what this is the app, Okay, and before we publish it, we'd really like to test our development version of Mustachify inside of our app. Now, our app is only configured to pull things from the registry. So how is it that we can make those two things come together? Well, the way that we're going to do that is with a command called npm link. So you go to your Mustachify module and you say npm link. What's that going to do? npm link, it's going to create a symlink. And that symlink is going to be pointing again to that same global directory we talked about when we installed things globally. And it's going to have a reference to the module itself. On top of that, if it has any bin objects, it will also link those to your user local bin directory. So that's on your path as well. So you can also test out CLIs this way as well before you publish them. But npm link, so that's one part, but this doesn't get it into our app yet, right? So in order to get into the app, we're going to go to the app itself, and we're going to run npm link Mustachify. If we didn't put Mustachify, it would just create a symlink for this project, which is not what we want. Instead, we want to bring in one that's already been linked. We do that, and it creates a double symlink, which creates the effect of putting it into the node modules directory, and then you're able to use a development version live in your development. That make sense to everyone? Yeah? Cool. Great. Oh, I already talked about the bin object. But wait, there's more. There's the bin object, and when it does it, yeah, we already talked about that. Okay. Let's see here, versioning and publishing. So that's all well and good. You've worked on your module, you brought in your dependencies, you defined your dev dependencies, you put together your bin objects, you've tested it, you've linked it to wherever the context of where it's going to be deployed. Now you're really ready. There's two different commands you're going to need. There's npm version and npm publish. Now technically, you really don't need npm version. You could do the stuff npm version does yourself manually, but why when you've got a tool to do it for you? And again, following semver, you tell it what kind of changes you made. Did you make major breaking changes? Did you add functionality in a backwards compatible way, so it's a minor change? Or did you do bug fixes that are backwards compatible and it should be a patch? So you tell it what you want it to be, and what it will do is it will automatically it will bump the version in your package JSON, whatever, according to whatever you told it, and then it'll make, if you're in Git, which everyone's on Git, right? Okay. It will make a new commit. It'll make a new commit, and then it will tag that commit with the version number. So then you can take, what it won't do afterwards though is it won't publish it to the registry and it won't push it to your upstream. That's left up to you, which is kind of nice because if you did make a mistake, all you have to do is knock that last commit off of the top of your repository and you can try again, right? But that's all it does, is it makes, the tag is really handy, of course, so that way you can go back and reference your release later. Anyway, and then obviously you have to change the version number. The other side of it is the publish side, and what that will do is it's going to take everything in your node mod, except the node modules directory, and you can configure this. There's an object in the package.json called files, and you can specify exactly which files you want published on publish. But anyway, then it will publish them to the registry, and then they're available for anyone. Of course, before you do that, you're going to have to authenticate first, and you can use npm add user to do that. Ask for your username, password, and email, and you're good to go. You'll obviously need to register first on npm. And that works the same even if you're using like a private registry or something like that. And like I said, yeah, we talked about files already. So yeah, npm publish and version. That's important if you want to get it out there for people to use. Okay, distribution tags. So when you publish, by default, it's going to publish under the latest tag. It happens all behind the scenes. But what you can do is you can also publish under a specific tag. So like, for instance, NPM itself uses NPM to manage it, which is pretty cool. And while they were running NPM 3 before it was released as stable, they were running it under a beta tag. It wasn't called beta, but it was like NPM 3-beta or something like that. And then you could install it using that tag. And if you use that tag, they could move that tag from release to release. And then as long as you use that tag, you would always get the one, whichever one it was that they had marked was the beta. Excuse me. And then the way that you install it, like you can see down here, npm install the module at the beta. Cool? Good. Okay, npm shrink wrap. So I've had mixed feelings on shrink wrap recently since I actually made this slide. But the idea with shrink wrap is it takes all of your currently installed dependencies, your whole tree. It knows where it got them from. it knows exactly what version number they are, what their names are, what their dependencies are, and it takes all of them and puts it into a file called npm-shrinkwrap.json. And it completely describes your dependency tree. And so if you come back and you do run npm install later and one of these JSON files is present, it will, instead of doing whatever you put in your package JSON, it will install exactly what your shrink wrap says. Okay? You can also customize it. It doesn't have to be your entire tree. If you want to just specify one specific thing in there, you can do that. And then it will, the other ones, it will behave normally, but that one will be like forever fixed and frozen. And then if you ever want to update it, you'll have to go update the shrink wrap file. I prefer to just use save exact than shrink wrap. Like I said, I've kind of had some not as positive experiences with NPM shrink wrap recently where it wasn't quite working the way I had hoped it would, but like I said, this was since I made this slide even. Okay, all right, NPM scopes.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So is that kind of equivalent to gemfile.lock?
I have not used Ruby gems really much, so I really can't tell you. Okay, sorry. Sounds like it's similar though. Okay, any others on that one? No? Okay. Sweet, we still got some time here. Okay, NPM scopes. So if you're familiar with scopes right now, it's probably because this is what NPM has been using to push out their private registries option, and sorry, their private modules, which is what they're selling now, is one of the ways they're monetizing. And I think it's like $7 a month. And the way that they do it is that your scope is going to be your username. So mine would be @mwinchy. But technically, what NPM says is that a scope is just a bunch of related modules. Somehow they are related, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that they're published by the same person or in the same thing. So if you're using the public registry, that's pretty much what's going to have to happen. But at Workfront, we use a private registry. So one of the things that we've been able to do is we've been able to take all of the modules which live under our modularity contract, which we've set up, and part of the contract says you have to be in this scope. Why do we want that? Well, the nice thing is when something's in a scope and it goes to install it, it will install it instead of just directly in your node modules directory. It'll make a subdirectory with the name of your scope and then install it inside that. And the reason why this is beneficial for us is that when we go to our app, we can go in and we can look through that scope directory and we can see all of the modules which need to be bootstrapped automatically. And we know they obey our contract because they're in this scope. So we can automatically pull all of them, bootstrap them all into our app in a very hands-off kind of no-hassle fashion just because we used a scope. So there are applications for scopes. It may not always be applicable to what you're doing, but if you do use private registries, know that you'll run into them. Privacy. So again, I talked a little bit how we use a private registry. There's also the private modules options. Just some of the pros and cons about the different options that you have available if keeping your modules private is important to you. If you run your own registry, you're obviously going to have to worry about maintenance. You're going to have to make sure it keeps up. But there are lots of different options you have available if that's something you're interested in. We use a project called Sinopia, and it works just great. I actually, when I was getting ready to do the live demo version, I put a copy of Sinopia on my laptop so I could have it as a backup if the network like totally crapped out on me. So it's pretty nice. At the same time, there are reasons why you might want to use a private module instead, and it probably is going to depend from project to project what's appropriate for what you're doing. Questions on that? No? Cool. All right. We're almost, sweet, this is going well. So talking about configuring NPM, there's a kind of a chain. Then there's tons of different configs that you have. I guess you can't really see that completely, but it says config there, you can probably guess. There's lots of different config options that allow you to configure everything, including if you're using a private registry, you'll need to configure the registry so it's not going to the default one. But there's a chain it follows, and the chain starts at the one that's built into the NPM. Then they have a global NPM RC file. Then there's one in your user directory, and these are all just following each other, and each one can override the previous one, right? So then you can have one inside your project, which can override the users and everything previous. And then you have some keys in the package JSON file, like for instance, there is a publish config. And anything you put in the publish config, when you run publish, in that specific scenario, can override any configs that were set up beforehand. Like, for instance, the registry you want to publish to. Then you can set configs with CLI arguments. You can put I always use registry because that's the one I have to use most often because we have a private registry. But you can put -- registry on pretty much anything and specify the registry you want it to point to. And then all that completes to a effective configuration that's actually run. Okay. And I guess that's it. So if there are any questions, we'll switch over to the demo I had, and thank you. So I guess I lied about having more slides than time. When I timed this, I was like 13 minutes over. That's how my presentations tend to go, I guess. You can never guess what it's going to be like. So, did anybody come up with any ideas here? Sweet. We got nickeliferous, pseudo-anachronistic micro. Wow. Okay. We'll keep them coming. This should be getting a stream from Twitter. Does anyone have any questions?
So I've used NPM link quite a bit, and then you sort of you forget to unlink things, and NPM doesn't really tell you. I don't think if you're using like a local package versus registry. Do you have any suggestions as to
how to remember to unlink?
Symbolic links, what's going where?
I think right now it's probably just good practice and good habit that you get into. You remember to unlink when you're done. That said, it's not particularly harmful to leave your link from the source directory in because it's just going to create something like there. It's more harmful when you have it on the destination package, right? And that's the one where you're like, oh, I'm using the wrong one. The good news is that if you run npm install, linked packages do not meet dependencies. So they will get replaced. So as long as you're running npm install regularly, before you do anything super important, like you're getting ready to publish, run npm install first, make sure everything's good. That will remove your links. Now, I suppose it wouldn't remove a link if you linked in something that wasn't in your package.json as a dependency. In that case, it would stick around. But in that case, you might have a bigger problem because it's not in your package.json. What else do we got? Okay, do we have any? No others? Okay, well, hey, thank you, everyone. And I guess we'll let you out a minute early.